Imagine this. You walk into a grand hall lit by cold chandeliers. Around you are people dressed in elegance, suits sharp as razors, smiles gleaming, voices smooth. They talk of progress, leadership, innovation. But listen closely. Behind every smile is calculation. Every compliment is a move in a game. Every handshake conceals a blade. And yet these are the ones society rewards. The ones climbing to the top. Now look again. In the corner stands someone else. Quiet, thoughtful, principled. They work hard, stay honest, avoid stepping on others. They wait for recognition that never comes. In this world, it's not character that wins. It's control. Not sincerity, but strategy. Why do the worst people seem to succeed? It's a question you've probably asked in silence. When the loudest person in the room got the promotion. When the liar walked away clean. When someone ruthless seized the spotlight while the kind-hearted were left in the dark. It feels like a glitch in the system. But what if it's not a glitch at all? What if this is the system? History tells the same story again and again. Emperors who ruled through fear, moguls who built fortunes on manipulation, cult leaders who twisted reality. They rise, not despite their cruelty, but because of it. And worse, they're admired for it. Power respects power, no matter how it's obtained. But here lies the paradox. If cruelty is a path to success, why do we still pretend to value virtue? If the worst people climb the highest, what does that say about the ladder itself? And more disturbingly, if the game is rigged in their favor, why do we keep playing by the rules? The truth is unsettling, and it runs deeper than morality. It touches the root of human psychology, the architecture of civilization, the myths we've been taught since childhood. We are told that hard work brings rewards, that goodness will triumph, that justice is inevitable. But look around. Does that mirror the world you see? Or is that just the bedtime story we whisper to ourselves before sleep? The real world is messier, colder, more brutal. And in it, the most ruthless often rise, not in spite of the system, but because they've learned to bend it. So what does this mean for those who refuse to abandon their values? Are we condemned to be trampled in the pursuit of virtue? Or is there a different kind of strength? One buried deeper than ambition, more enduring than dominance. What if the true test isn't whether you win the game, but whether you learn to see the game for what it really is? What if the answer to this paradox doesn't lie in choosing between morality and power, but in transcending both? Before we can find the answer, we must first go into the roots of the illusion, into the philosophies that shaped power, into the psychology that permits it, into the hidden machinery of a world that rewards masks more than faces. Because only when we understand why the worst rise, can we begin to reclaim our own path. And that journey begins here. To understand why the worst people succeed, you must first understand what society truly values. Not what it claims to value, but what it rewards. These are not always the same thing. From childhood, you were conditioned to believe in fairness. You were told that good people win, that honesty is noble, and that playing by the rules would be enough. But beneath this comforting narrative, something far older and colder is at work. This is not a recent flaw. It's not a modern disease. It's a feature of human civilization itself, baked into our evolutionary past and reinforced by thousands of years of power structures. At its core, power doesn't care about virtue. Power respects effectiveness. This brutal insight was laid bare by Friedrich Nietzsche, who shattered the illusion that morality is some divine truth, some universal compass guiding humanity. Instead, he argued that morality is the product of power dynamics, that it evolved not from enlightenment, but from survival. He called it master morality and slave morality, two entirely different ways of interpreting the world. Master morality emerges from strength, from those who create, conquer, and shape reality with their will. The masters define their own values: power, courage, ambition, vitality. They are not bound by external rules because they are the ones who write them. Slave morality, on the other hand, is born from the powerless. Those who cannot impose their will find ways to cope. They redefine strength as evil and humility as good. They glorify suffering. They moralize weakness. It is not a natural rejection of dominance. It is a strategic adaptation, a survival mechanism masquerading as ethics. This is the hidden architecture behind society's morality. We're told to be kind, humble, obedient, not because these traits are always true or just, but because they make us easier to manage. Nietzsche wasn't endorsing cruelty. He was exposing the lie. Think about it. The traits often associated with success, charisma, confidence, ambition, decisiveness, are not inherently good or evil. They are tools. And those who learn to wield them without the burden of guilt or self-doubt have a clear advantage. Now consider the psychological layer. Carl Jung, a student of the unconscious mind, believed that we each possess a shadow, the dark, repressed aspects of ourselves we refuse to see. These aren't just fears or trauma. They are also the traits society tells us we must reject: assertiveness, ambition, even anger. The more we deny these parts of ourselves, the more power they have over us. We become timid, apologetic, self-sabotaging. We project strength onto others and shrink in their presence. We confuse humility with passivity, integrity with powerlessness. Meanwhile, those who integrate their shadow, who become aware of their dark side and learn to use it, become whole. They are no longer fragmented, no longer at war with themselves, and that internal unity becomes external influence. It's not that the worst people have no morality. It's that they've stopped asking for permission to be powerful. Society often rewards this clarity, the cold precision of a CEO who makes brutal decisions without blinking, the politician who lies with a smile, the influencer who sells a fiction because the truth wouldn't trend. The world doesn't punish ruthlessness. It monetizes it. This is why the worst often rise. Not because they're smarter, not because they're better, but because they are willing to do what others won't, and most importantly, because they believe they are allowed to. And still, we pretend to be shocked. We watch the corrupt succeed and whisper, "How could this happen?" But deep down, we know the answer. It happens because the systems we've built are not designed to reward virtue. They are designed to reward results. In a competitive world, kindness without strength is exploited. Truth without strategy is ignored. Vulnerability without wisdom is mocked. This is the psychological trap we find ourselves in. Schopenhauer, the great pessimist, saw human life as a brutal struggle driven by blind, insatiable will. He believed that suffering was baked into the human condition, and that society merely offers us distractions and illusions to keep us docile. The belief in fairness, a myth to tame the masses. The celebration of weakness, a trick to prevent rebellion, and so we comply. We strive to be good, hoping the world will notice. But the world is not watching. It's not measuring your virtue. It's measuring your utility. This isn't a call to abandon ethics. It's a wake-up call to understand the battlefield you're standing on. Because those who understand this deeper layer, those who see the myth of fairness for what it is, can begin to operate differently. They can learn to navigate a ruthless world without becoming hollow themselves. They can stop waiting for approval and start choosing strategy over submission. But understanding the philosophical and psychological roots is only part of the truth. What's more disturbing is what happens when we don't see it, when we continue to believe the lie, when we cling to an idea of justice that doesn't exist. That's where the damage really begins. Because the next question is far more unsettling. What are the consequences of living in a world that rewards masks more than faces? And what does it do to the soul of a society that confuses morality with weakness? You wake up each day believing you're playing a fair game. You work hard, you stay honest, you try to be kind, and yet, nothing changes. You watch others lie, scheme, manipulate, and rise. Slowly, doubt begins to creep in. Not just doubt in the system, but in yourself, in your worth, your strength, your sanity. This is where the damage begins, not in the external failures, but in the internal erosion. Because the most dangerous consequence of a world that rewards ruthlessness is not that bad people win. It's that good people begin to question whether being good is even worth it. This is the hidden cost of the game, the slow disintegration of personal identity under the weight of repeated betrayal. You start to censor yourself, water yourself down, keep your head low, hoping to survive unnoticed. You become risk-averse, paralyzed by the fear of rejection or retaliation. Every interaction becomes a calculation, a negotiation between authenticity and self-preservation. And as this process continues, something else happens. You begin to distrust everyone. This isn't paranoia, it's a psychological response to repeated exposure to manipulation and injustice, a condition psychologists call learned helplessness. When the brain detects that outcomes are no longer tied to effort, it shuts down motivation altogether. You no longer believe your actions matter. You become passive, apathetic, emotionally numb. And society loves you this way because you're no longer a threat. This psychological numbing isn't just individual, it's collective. It spreads through institutions, workplaces, families. Entire generations raised to believe that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth. That success is for the cunning. That power is dirty and virtue is naive. We've created a culture where people are celebrated for looking good rather than being good. Image is everything. Optics matter more than outcomes. And morality? Morality has been reduced to a performance, hollow gestures to appease public opinion, while the real decisions are made behind closed doors. The internet accelerates this distortion. Algorithms favor outrage. The loudest voices rise, regardless of truth. Virtue becomes content. Suffering becomes marketing. And somewhere along the way, the line between sincerity and simulation dissolves. This is not an accident. It's the logical outcome of a system that rewards strategy over substance. And in such a world, empathy becomes a liability. Research shows that high-empathy individuals often underperform in competitive environments, not because they lack intelligence, but because they carry emotional weight that others do not. They hesitate, they overthink, They see too much. They feel too much. And this emotional depth, once seen as a strength, becomes an anchor. Meanwhile, those with narcissistic or psychopathic tendencies often thrive in environments where appearances matter more than ethics. Studies confirm that people with high levels of Machiavellianism, the willingness to manipulate and deceive for personal gain, tend to ascend faster in corporate and political structures, not because they're smarter, but because they are unburdened. The result? A selection process that filters out the introspective and amplifies the performative, where deep thinkers are labeled difficult and shallow opportunists are promoted as leaders. And over time, this distortion becomes normalized. We begin to accept that power and integrity are incompatible, that success requires sacrifice, not of effort, but of soul. We watch as those who once held strong ideals gradually become caricatures of themselves, twisted by the very systems they once sought to change. They conform, or they disappear, and so a dangerous message is sent, especially to the next generation. Play the game, or be left behind. This is how the rot spreads, not through violence or oppression, but through subtle conditioning, through a slow, grinding erosion of values. The kind you barely notice until one day you realize you've stopped dreaming altogether. You've stopped believing that strength and goodness can coexist. You've started to believe that ruthlessness is reality. And that belief, not the tyrants or liars, is what truly holds the world in place. Because as long as we believe that decency is weakness, we hand the world to those who prove us right. So the real danger isn't just that the worst people succeed. It's that we forget how to imagine anything else. And if you've ever felt this shift inside yourself, the quiet resignation, the temptation to just stop trying, then you know this isn't theoretical, it's personal. But this isn't the end of the story. Because somewhere deep inside you, a question still burns. Is there another way? A way to live in this world without becoming its product? A way to wield power without losing yourself? A way to escape the trap, not by retreating from the game, but by changing how it's played? That's where we go next. Imagine stepping out of the fog. After years of confusion, manipulation, and quiet frustration, you begin to see the system not as a mystery, but as a machine. Predictable, cold, engineered to reward surface over depth, domination over dignity. And yet, for the first time, you feel no urge to run. Because something has shifted inside you. Not a surrender, a rebellion. But this rebellion doesn't begin with slogans or protests. It begins with something quieter, more dangerous. It begins with awareness. You begin to see power not as something that belongs to the ruthless, but as something they have hijacked. You begin to understand that power itself is neutral. It is a tool, a current, a force that takes the shape of the vessel that holds it. And that vessel could be you. But first, you must unlearn the lie that goodness must be small. You were taught to choose between integrity and influence, between soul and success, between depth and dominance. That binary is false. The truth is this: power without integrity is corruption, but integrity without power is impotence. What we need now is a third path, one forged by those who refuse to compromise their soul or surrender their strength. You don't need to become a monster to protect yourself from monsters. You need to become dangerous, but disciplined, powerful, but principled. kind, but unbreakable. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche pointed to. Not the blind cruelty of the tyrant, but the inner fire of the Übermensch, the one who doesn't just react to the world, but reshapes it, not out of malice or greed, but out of creative necessity. Because while the ruthless play the short game of control, the self-possessed play the long game of transformation. They don't just seize power, they redefine it. And the first step in this rebellion is to reclaim the part of yourself you've been told to suppress, your will. Not the shallow, impulsive will to dominate, but the deep, steady will to become. The will to become someone who sees the system clearly, yet refuses to be consumed by it. Someone who can move through a broken world without breaking themselves. This shift doesn't come from imitation. It comes from individuation, a concept Carl Jung described as the process of becoming your full self, not the self shaped by fear, but the one born from your highest potential. To individuate is to extract yourself from the herd, to stop measuring your worth by validation or compliance. It is not a rejection of society, but a reordering of allegiance. Your inner truth becomes the authority, not the collective delusion. And when that happens, something radical occurs. You become immune to shame tactics, immune to emotional blackmail, immune to the illusion that silence is safety. Because once you've seen the machine, you can no longer pretend it's a home. And once you've felt your own power, you can no longer give it away. But let's be clear, this path is not without risk. You will lose people. You will be misunderstood. You will threaten those who depend on your silence to keep their illusions intact. There will be moments when you'll be tempted to shrink again, to soften your voice, to play dumb, to fit back in. Don't. Because every time you do, you reinforce the very structure you're trying to escape. The rebellion requires endurance, strategic thinking, emotional self-control, and above all, clarity. Clarity about who you are and who you refuse to be. This doesn't mean becoming a saint or a savior. It means becoming sovereign. To be sovereign is not to dominate others. It is to no longer need to. It is to stand rooted in your values while holding the mental flexibility to navigate a chaotic world. To be aware of the games being played without mistaking them for reality. And that requires strength. Not the brute strength of the bully, but the psychological strength of the one who can remain calm while others unravel. The emotional strength to hold space for truth even when it's inconvenient. The intellectual strength to ask better questions when the world offers lazy answers. This is the new power. The quiet, relentless power of those who refuse to be domesticated. It is built not on deception, but on discernment. Not on suppression, but on integration. Not on fear, but on self-respect. And once you've begun to embody this, once your presence begins to unsettle the status quo without you even speaking, you'll understand why the ruthless fear those who are truly free. Because the free cannot be controlled. The final act of rebellion is not to destroy the system, but to become so unshakably whole that the system no longer defines you. And when enough people do this, the system, quietly, inevitably, begins to change. Not through force, but through example. So don't become less to survive, become more to lead. Because the real battle was never about domination. It was about transformation. And now, as you prepare to walk that path, only one question remains. Are you ready to carry your power? Not as a weapon, but as a light. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you've been playing someone else's game. The rules? Written by the fearful. The rewards? Designed to pacify. The winners? Often those willing to trade integrity for influence. And yet, here you are, still whole, still searching, still refusing to disappear. Because somewhere, deep inside, you've always known, you weren't born to conform, you were born to transcend. But transcend what exactly? Not just society, not just injustice, not even your enemies. To transcend, in the truest sense, is to rise above the gravitational pull of your own lesser instincts, the parts of you that seek comfort over courage, safety over sovereignty, acceptance over authenticity. It is to dismantle the illusion that your worth can be measured by applause. And it is here, at this precipice, that the ultimate truth begins to unfold. Power was never the enemy. What corrupted was not the force itself, but the fear behind it, the desperation, the scarcity, the emptiness that sought control because it could not create. And that's the distinction. The ones who crave power to escape their insecurity will always weaponize it. But the ones who harness it to fulfill their potential, they build civilizations. Friedrich Nietzsche never declared that power was evil. He declared that power reveals. It reveals who you are beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the fragile veneer of morality upheld only by convenience. And so, the most important question is not, how do I get power? The question is, who will I become when I have it? That question is what separates the tyrant from the creator, the manipulator from the visionary, the conqueror from the Übermensch. Because here is the deeper truth. The Übermensch doesn't rise by crushing others beneath their feet. They rise by transcending the need to compete in the first place. They are not slaves to dominance or approval. They do not chase power to prove their worth. They know their worth, and from that foundation, they create power. And what they create is not a kingdom of control, but a reality infused with meaning. Meaning they define, meaning they embody. That's why they cannot be owned. That's why they cannot be broken. Because they are not fighting for scraps. They are building a new world entirely. So where does this leave you? It leaves you at the edge of an old identity. The part of you that hesitates, that stays silent, that waits for permission. But there is another part. One that's been whispering through the noise. The part that doesn't just want freedom. It is freedom. And now it asks, what are you waiting for? You do not need to destroy others to rise, but you do need to destroy the lies that have kept you small. The lie that humility means hiding. The lie that morality means submission. The lie that success belongs to the soulless. All of them are myths, created to keep you compliant, to keep you doubting, to keep you tame. But you're not here to be tame. You're here to embody a different kind of power. A power rooted not in domination, but in discernment. Not in obedience, but in original thought. Not in cruelty, but in creative fire. You are here to lead, not from ego, but from essence. And yes, the world may not be ready for you, but that's the point. It's not your job to fit a broken mold. It's your job to shatter it and become the blueprint for something better. This is the call to rise, not as a copy of those who came before, but as an evolutionary leap forward. A new archetype, one who is self-governed, self-defined, and self-transcending. Because while the worst people may succeed in this world, they will never own it, only creators do. So rise, not to rule over others, but to master yourself. Refuse the false choice between power and principle, and instead, choose sovereign strength, the kind that cannot be bought, threatened, or silenced. Because when you become the one who creates meaning instead of consuming it, leads instead of follows, transcends instead of conforms, you become dangerous, not to the world, but to the illusion that once kept you captive. And that is where life begins.